to Healing Horizons, where deep wisdom meets empowered well being. I'm your host, Pragya Malvia, and today's conversation is for every woman standing at the threshold of change, wondering what midlife really means. For many, the stage comes wrapped in fear: hot flashes, weight gain, mood swings, a sense of being invisible. But what if midlife isn't a decline, it's an awakening, a chance to return to your body's innate brilliance, reclaim your authority, and rise with wisdom? Our guest today, Dr. Marissa Heisel, has dedicated over 26 years to guiding women and families on this path. She weaves together holistic chiropractic care, midwifery, and child development rooted in a profound belief: you are your own best medicine. Her mission: to help women step out of cultural scripts and into their sovereignty, because true healing starts from within. So, if you are ready to rewrite the midlife narrative and embrace a new chapter of vitality, this episode is for you. Thank you, Dr. Marissa. Thank you for being here. I'm thrilled that you're here today.
Thank you so much, Pragya.
Marissa, if we talk about your work, it has so many lives. Um, can we know what sparked this calling? Was it a personal experience? Maybe, watching women struggle through might be pregnancy, or sensing the gaps in the conventional care that is given to them, which made you say that we need something more holistic. Share about your experience.
It's really all of those things, to be honest with you. I studied child development first in graduate school, then went on to become a chiropractor, and then did a number of years in midwifery. And for 26 years now, as a chiropractor, as a holistic chiropractor, I chose to work mainly with women and children because that's where my love and my passion were. And over and over and over again, I would have women come in who would tell me comments that were made to them by medical professionals when they were disregarded, when their own inner knowing about their body or their children was discounted, when women would go to see their medical doctor or their gynecologist at midlife, experiencing some challenges with perimenopause or menopause, and they would literally be told, we might as well take out your uterus because you don't need that anymore. And so, what I really began to see was that human beings are treated as these mechanistic things, as though we're cars that are just put together by different parts. And we're not the sum total of all of our experience and our family's experience and joys and traumas and everything that brings us to every stage of our life. And we have this constant capacity to grow and to change. And yet, human beings are the animals that are most resistant to change, aren't we? And so I think it was really just my own experience as a holistic doctor and attending births with women and seeing the raw power of women when they give birth, when they're allowed to give birth naturally as they're meant to without intervention, and then raising my own children and my stepchildren and doing that from a very holistic perspective. So I think it's just the sum total of all of my experiences, like everything in all of our lives is. But it's really brought me to this time now where I'm in my early 50s and I'm evaluating what is my purpose now, what is next for me. And it only makes sense now that I look at all of these different aspects of my professional career, my mothering, and bring them all together into something that feels like it is both uniquely mine, but also speaks to the needs of women at these two really profound and powerful times of life, both when we're having and raising young children and when, or not even young children, when we're raising children, because children have needs at every stage of life, and when we ourselves are going through midlife changes, because that's where I am in my own life right now.
I totally get it. And thank you. Thank you, first of all, for sharing that with us. And Yes, that is so powerful. Also, the way you shared your experience. Thank you for doing that. Also, I would love to know that as you stepped into this work, what was the biggest mindset shift that you have experienced? A shift which, which is something that completely it changed how you view your health, how you view yourself, and how you work upon your own health. What was that?
They're slightly different things, but I'll start with your first question of as I stepped into this, what was the biggest shift for me? And to be honest with you, it was actually stepping into greater visibility. I think when you look at 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, it's somehow very normal and natural for them to turn on a camera and start blogging or live streaming, talking to TikTok, talking to YouTube. But as a woman in my early 50s, that's not quite as normal. So while I've spoken as a speaker on very large stages to literally tens of thousands of people, I haven't appeared on camera so much in front of total strangers. There's a certain comfort in speaking to the audience that already knows you and likes you. So for me, there had to be a realization that in order to step into this next phase of my work, I needed to become much more comfortable with being more visible, both on camera and to a larger audience. So thank you, in fact, for your part in allowing me to do that as I'm shifting forward. In terms of my own health, I'm one of those people that for probably 31, 32 years ago, before I even started chiropractic, I started embracing holistic health more and more. I have a lot of sensitivities to chemicals and started cutting them out when I was in my mid 20s, where all of my cleaning supplies changed, then all of my body care products changed, then even tampons and pads were replaced with menstrual cups. And that was before I even went into the health field. I started recognizing that so much of the environment that we're in, so many of the products that we use are not conducive to human health or women's health. And now, 32 years later, it feels like more of society is finally catching up, where these conversations are much more normal than they were at the time. But for me, these changes predated having children or predated chiropractic even. And, it's interesting because you'll look at something like younger influencers, and I say that word with a little bit of humor, on things like Instagram. And the way they speak is as though people need to change everything in their lives and health all at once. Everything needs to get thrown out and replaced with things that are cleaner and safer. And that's not realistic because what happens then is the cost of that is so daunting for people that they don't do it. Or if you're somebody with lower economic means, you feel you can never do it. And the best thing that we can do is to start to make small changes. Wherever you want to begin that change, maybe it's with your menstrual products, maybe it's with the food that you're eating. My children are now 23 and 20 years old. They've never eaten fast food. They've never eaten at McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken because that was never how I raised them. So we can make small changes by not only bringing new things into our home, but also deciding what we don't want to introduce into our home. I didn't have cable TV throughout my children's, upbringing because I didn't want them exposed to marketing that was going to market poor quality toys and poor quality food to them. So it's becoming conscious, making conscious decisions about what's important to you, what your family values are, what your healthcare values are, and starting to institute small changes one by one by one so that when you come to your midlife as a woman, you're already at this point of trusting yourself, knowing who you are, engaging in new ideas, being willing to question your own strongly held beliefs because you already know who you are. And changing small things in your life doesn't sway you from that knowledge.
That is so, so powerful. And I totally, I'm so glad that you shared this experience again. Uh, as you said that you kept your children away from those ads, those fast food things, and you started small. That is something that I totally agree with, right? Most of the people out there on Instagram, as you said, they just, uh, make it so unrealistic, and they make it sound so unbearable and so unrealistic for people to even follow. Thank you for making it so clear, and thank you for starting small. Also, when most people they hear midlife, they picture anti-aging ads,
Hmm.
they picture memes about mood swings and jokes about menopause with which circulate so much as, even dark comedy sometimes. And a culture, it almost markets fear at this stage. It inhibits that fear into women who are just, about to start their midlife, or whenever they think about their midlife. So why do you think that society, it frames midlife as something to fix, rather than to embrace, as you said, right? Also, what do you think? Who profits from this fear that inhibit into women?
Those are both brilliant questions. Thank you. I, I'm going to suggest this. I don't think it's just at midlife. I think the two most powerful times in a woman's life are when she is pregnant and about to give birth and become a mother, and then again when she is just on the verge of midlife. Because those are two critical life phases when a woman can step fully into her power. And I don't mean that from any aggressive or anti masculine sense. I don't believe in that at all. But it's when a woman can step into her deep knowing and deep embodiment. And instead, what happens is this cultural conditioning throughout the world, no matter where you live, that begins by targeting mothers and children to establish this early compliance and dependency on some external system and authority, and then strikes again during midlife when women's natural wisdom and intuition and internal authority would otherwise emerge most powerfully. And when we medicalize and externalize both childhood development and midlife transitions, the systems that should not be in power, but perhaps are, ensure that women remain disconnected from their sovereignty really throughout their entire lives. And children grow up never learning to trust their own bodies. And so, by the time a woman gets to midlife, if she has had children, and I would say by and large, more women probably still have children than do not, she has already been through pregnancy where she has been told that what is a natural, beautiful process that we have done for eons without pharmaceutical and medicalizing everything, that we are incapable of doing without outside intervention. When a woman goes to give birth, it is generally highly medicalized throughout the world and takes away a woman's experience of what would otherwise be probably the most powerful physical and emotional time of her life to that point. And then, even with raising children, a woman is constantly undermined that when she knows that something is not right with her child, when she knows that something should be looked at, when she knows, she's constantly told that she doesn't know, that some outside authority, school, government, medicine, something knows better than she does. So now this woman comes to midlife when she should be stepping into this incredible, empowered wisdom, this intuition, and as soon as menopausal symptoms start or perimenopause starts, instead of being taught how to listen to her body, instead of being taught natural shifts in foods or in supplements, instead of being taught to breathe and to observe and to ask about her own experience, she's told that she doesn't need her uterus, or we can just medicalize, we can give you drugs that will cut off your experience. And that's what we live with throughout our entire lives, is this disconnection from our own experience, this numbing of our experience, so that we can never truly rise into our own power. And I think that that is the reason for it. Because women historically were the wisdom keepers, were the shamans, were the midwives, the nurses who carried the wisdom of their lineage, both in terms of medicine and in terms of life itself. So often that was women's work. And when you can disconnect a woman from her understanding of that and from her own sense of self and power, her purpose in the world, you end up with a society that does not have a North Star, does not have an inner compass to say, what I'm seeing outside of my family is not right. What I'm seeing in the media, in government, in movies, this is not right. This is not what we should be seeing or showing. This is disempowering for us as human beings. I think human beings are far more powerful than we begin to understand or to believe or to know. And if we continue to allow this outside in, boot that keeps pushing us down, we will never, ever understand what our true power is. And it's steering us towards this very transhumanist future. Using technology is fine if we understand who we are and we maintain our sense of human creativity and curiosity and our sense of purpose. But if we don't know what those are, then we allow more and more systems outside of us to take control. And our children never learn to trust themselves, to know their bodies, to understand their power. And I think we are at a critical time right now where, as you said, the fear mongering outside of us is so powerful, so much louder than it has ever been in the last 5 years. If it's not about our health, it's about our finances. If it's not about our finances, it's about governments and politics and wars and invasion. And if people get stuck listening to that, it hijacks their brain and their nervous system so that they are truly incapable of looking where we need to look to see who is conducting this behavior. And it causes us to look at each other with animosity and fear and fighting.
I agree to that, and I love that. I love the whole description and that you've given and the points that you've raised and put in. Absolutely correct. And okay, let's do one thing. Let's picture this woman who is doing everything right, eating well, working out, but suddenly she's exhausted, her clothes they don't fit, and she wonders if this is just aging or something else. So for someone who is listening who feels this way, what is the first thing that you would want her to know, one thing that she really needs to hear?
The reality is that our bodies do change at midlife. Our hormones do change at midlife. And so, even if we're doing everything right, and I need to say that I don't know if there is any such thing. We all do the best we can. Sometimes we need to learn more in order to do the best we can. But I don't know if there's ever such a thing, because if we say that we're doing everything right, that puts such intense pressure on us. So if we say we're all doing the best we can, and now we come upon a completely new time of life where our hormones have changed, our weight is changing, our brains are changing a little bit, our roles as mothers, if we're mothers, change somewhat, where our children are potentially not in our home any longer, where we have more time and space to focus on ourselves, but we also might not be feeling at our very best. And so the first thing that we can look at is, or consider, is that this does not mean that we're ill. This is not a disease process. This does not mean that we are broken and need to be fixed. This is a time of change. And if we can first and foremost just allow our mindset to embrace that, as opposed to embracing it, as opposed to looking at it with fear. What's happening to me? What's wrong with me? How do I fix this? Who do I speak to? If instead we can acknowledge that first and foremost, we are going through a period of massive change and celebrate that for the wisdom that our bodies have and the continuity of women's lives that have always been there. In terms of what to do physically and physiologically, it really depends on what you're experiencing. So, this might be a time, if you choose to get some lab work done to see where are your hormones? What is your cardiovascular health looking like? What is your inflammatory system looking like? Where are things maybe out of balance? What does your mineral status look like? Where are things in balance? What is high and what is low? And then we can begin to address those things with whatever is needed to change them or to bring them back into balance, let's say. Sometimes it's we need more specific minerals. We need B vitamins. We need, more vitamin C. We need something that will help us with the inflammation that's going on in our body. Sometimes that's both, you know, changes in the way that we're exercising. If we've been used to doing high intensity aerobics, midlife is a time where we really need to be looking more at um, doing weights, and lifting heavier weights than perhaps we might think, because that helps with protecting our bones, protecting our hearts. So there are changes that need to be made, and people that can help that can help guide us into understanding what those changes might be. And they can be very unique for various women, and yet they've got similar themes to them. Sometimes what can be helpful with that weight gain is looking at our liver health, doing a little bit of a liver cleanse in order to help our liver to process more of what it is that it needs to process, our hormones, our foods, all of those things. Maybe we need to look at changing our diet a little bit. But we can address these things bit by bit without going into fear or thinking that by taking a pill or having surgery, that's going to be the panacea that cures everything all at once. Because that's just not the case. There is no one size fits all approach. And surgery is always a risk, always causes further changes in our bodies. And so does medication, which is not to say that we should never take it. If a woman needs biological hormone replacement with a provider who really knows how to compound it for her body based on her lab results, there are absolutely times where that can be beneficial. But it's this one size fits all approach that everyone gets the same medication or nobody needs lab work. I lived in a rural area of Canada before I left Canada with my family a few years ago. And in the area that I was in, I would send women back to their medical doctors to say, would you run these labs? And I would be very specific with which labs I wanted run. And by and large, every medical doctor would say, well, I don't know what to do with the results, so I'm not going to bother running them. Okay, somebody knows what to do with those results. I do, other people do. So this very patriarchal, even from female medical doctors, this very patriarchal approach that I won't do what will give us more information, but I will either do surgery or put you on this medication without actually knowing if it's what you need, is not the right way to go. Finding those people who can help you figure out what your body specifically needs so that you can go and make those changes, find that balance, bring in new foods, bring in different exercise, is so beneficial.
I love that. I love that. Also, how rightly said, you mentioned so many advices and insights where, starting small, instead of, trying to overhaul everything all at once and, focusing on what is more needed than what is more conventional. I totally, totally agree to it. Also, of course, health, it isn't just physical, it's emotional too, and that piece it often gets overlooked, and midlife can carry invisible stress, aging parents, teenage kids, career transitions, and That emotional weight often shows up as, fatigue or anxiety or even inflammation and PCOS at some points. How do you see stress and mindset impacting women's health during this stage?
I think stress and anxiety and worry and depression impact women's lives in total, not just at midlife, because we are so hormonally driven with this beautiful hormonal dance every month until menopause. um, Stress and anxiety and mindset and worry and all of those things can impact our bodies in very real ways. And so finding ways that we can mitigate that stress, that we can recognize that we are in a difficult season if we are in a difficult season, but it does not mean that we need to attach ourselves to a label. There is such a desire to pathologize life and health these days. I see it constantly in comment sections if I look at them, and I try very hard not to. Somebody will post this beautiful YouTube video, and then you'll get younger people who come in and say, well, maybe he's just dysphoric, or maybe he's this, or, Einstein was actually autistic. And so we shouldn't be talking about. And I'm thinking, when did normal life experiences become something that we need to have a diagnostic label for absolutely everything? And the answer to that is that you can sell a lot more drugs when you pathologize everything and you turn it into a disease process. If we look at aging as an achievement, as a crown of wisdom, not a failure that needs to be reversed in order to look like we're 25 or 35 again, that every line in our face represents experience gained, that every change reflects a life that has been fully lived. And when we embrace this truth, it's an act of rebellion against both a youth obsessed culture and this medical pathologizing of our lives. There's something to be said for returning to a simpler time or a simpler belief system, that we embrace our own joy, that we look at reverence of life and wisdom, that we celebrate our breath and can use a simple process. Not everybody in the West knows how to meditate. They really struggle with that sometimes, but we all breathe. So there's such power just in sitting down and learning to watch our breath, to listen to it, to feel where it's moving, to help us regulate our nervous systems and get ourselves out of this spinning anxiety that it is so easy to fall into. Part of that though goes back to what you also said earlier, which is this incredible fear, this noise that is going on all around us all the time. And we need to find a way to shut off that noise. So, what we're listening to is our bodies and our wisdom and our intuition, and acknowledging when something isn't right, isn't balanced, needs to be addressed, but without this fear that this must mean I have whatever the diagnostic label is now for the emotion, for the mental space, for the physical condition, as though everything needs to be medicated out of existence. We need to feel our bodies. We need to teach our children to feel their bodies. We need to be embodied, moving from a place of inner wisdom and inner strength, so that when we come up against something that feels wrong for us, something where we're being told that we must comply, something where we're being threatened with some sort of an action if we don't, we stand in our own power and know if this is right for us or not, without fear of repercussion. Because so much of this noise is just noise, it's empty threat. But if we allow it to dictate our lives, it will dictate our lives. And then we're no longer truly living fully human embodied experiences. We're living whatever story somebody outside of us is trying to put on us. And that's not the way to live or the way to raise our children.
That is such a powerful reminder. Mm. Listeners, you really need to take these insights. because you're not going to get these insights anywhere else. And they're so great. And I hope a lot of people they resonate with it. Also, there is this mantra of yours, which is you are your own best medicine, and we have talked about it in this conversation a lot. And it is so empowering. Also, for women who feel disconnected from their body's wisdom, how can they, actually start trusting themselves again and take those little daily rituals or daily steps, and what are those steps also, if you can suggest to them that they need to take so that they break the cycle of resistance?
That's a very good question. And I think, again, it's a slow process. I think we start with sitting down and really, whether you journal, whether you just think deeply, you meditate, you pray, whatever it is, you ask yourself who you are at this stage in your life. What do you want for the next, if you're 55 years old, what do you want for the next 25 years of your life? How do you want to be the matriarch of your family? Do you want to be the wisdom keeper? Do you want to be traveling? I mean, God willing, you're going to be healthy. You want to be mobile. What are the things that are most important to you? And you start to look at your own blueprint for living the best life that you can right now. And then you extend that out to your family values. If you've never sat down and done this when your children are younger, it's still something that we can do at midlife. What are our family values that guide the way that I interact with my adult children now, with my grandchildren, with my future great grandchildren? What feels important to me? How do I want to show up? Once we know that, then we can start to see the cracks in the story that we're being told we need to follow. We can see where those things are no longer in alignment. I talk a lot about being in alignment with our own higher self, with our own inner knowing, with our own purpose. But first you need to sit down and ask yourself, what is alignment for me? What feels true? What feels important? What feels like nothing can change this belief system that I have. And then what we start to do is we start to do the deep work to look at root causes in our own health. Sometimes it's emotional trauma, sometimes it was physical trauma, sometimes it was trauma that our parents or our grandparents might have carried, this family lineage that says that we always address things in this way. We always have issues around abundance, or we always have issues with. And we start to ask ourselves, is this true for me? We start to separate out what the story is versus what is true for me. And it can be simple things that help us with that. It can be getting back outside into nature, putting down the smartphones and the devices that take so much of our time and energy and are always directing us to these stories outside of us, these authorities outside of us, and always coming back to what is my truth. Where do I find love in my body? How do I want to live my life from the healthiest perspective possible? So you regain your inner authority to address all the different aspects of your life, health included, of course. So getting outside into nature helps to break that cycle of fear and outside in authority so that we start to connect back into what is permanent and real and true, as opposed to whatever the talking point today might be. Getting into nature is one way. Following our breath is another way. Having close friends that we can explore these ideas with so that we don't feel like we're isolated. But coming to a point in our lives where we are willing, perhaps more than we have previously, we are willing to stand on our own. That doesn't mean isolated or lonely, but stand on our own so that we are always standing in our own highest truth, our own highest good, our own inner compass and authority, and claiming this radical responsibility for our own lives. it feels like, to me, it feels like this is becoming more and more vital, that if we are not willing to take responsibility for ourselves and our healing and our lives, that we are going to be overrun by whatever the technological story of the future is. And humanity is at a real crossroads right now. And women, as always, hold so much of the wisdom and power to shift things in a different direction.
Hmm. So rightly said, and I totally agree with you uh, about this thing where women they can actually bring in shifts within, help even others bring that change and that shift. Thank you, Marissa, for guiding us through this conversation with such depth and compassion. And you've reminded us that midlife and, just the normal, even the normal woman life, it isn't something to fear. It is a threshold and an invitation to step into our own authority and rewrite the story of our health. Listeners, this is Healing Horizons, and I'm your host, Pragya Malvia. Until next time, stay tender, stay sovereign, and remember your body, it holds wisdom. Your story, it is sacred. And yes, you are your own best medicine. Thank you.